Hey Wargamers, we just wrapped up another great stream over on Twitch from Warhammer Community. Today they were talking about how tanks and monsters will function in 9th edition 40k. So let's break down what we learned. First, we got clarification on a couple things. One is actually a really important, huge point that's not included in the Warhammer Community article, and that is that the -1 to hit modifier for moving and shooting heavy weapons only applies to infantry. And that was the vocabulary that they used, was infantry. So it's not that it doesn't apply to vehicles and monsters, is that it only applies to infantry. So things like crisis suits, which aren't infantry, but also aren't monsters or vehicles, would also fall into this category of not having a move and shoot penalty. Now, crisis suits, of course, don't have heavy weapons, but you get the idea, right? That there are a large number of models now that suffer movement penalties for shooting heavy weapons. No longer in 9th edition will that be the case. That's huge. That makes playing a much more mobile force much more practical, and that's in a lot of ways necessary given the design philosophy of 9th edition missions, that they are really pushing for dynamic battles, really much more of a I don't want to use the word skirmish, but really that's what comes to mind. A skirmish on these smaller tabletops where people need to move, need to position and do really dynamic tactics in order to win the mission. And so having that -1 to hit modifier only applied to infantry, I think makes a lot of sense. Lore-wise, it also makes a lot of sense if you're trying to facilitate these more dynamic battles. So that's cool. That's awesome. That opens up a lot of possibilities for models that we don't see on the tabletop as much right now. Just that alone is huge. Another clarification we got was what is engagement range. They've mentioned engagement range before, and there's some speculation on this. Yeah, it's just the codified term for being within 1 inch of an enemy model. So engagement range, not really that big of a deal. Much bigger deal, the -1 to hit modifier only applying to infantry. That's huge. But really the centerpiece of today's stream, the focus of the Warhammer Community article today, is on big guns never tire. This is a new rule that says a vehicle or monster model can make attacks with ranged weapons even when its unit is within engagement range, again, within 1 inch of enemy model, but it can only make such attacks against enemy units that it is within engagement range of. In such circumstances, vehicle and monster models can target an enemy unit even if other friendly units are within engagement range of the same enemy unit. Note that if a vehicle or monster unit has more than one ranged weapon, you can still choose to target units that are not within engagement range of the firing model's unit, but they will only be able to make the attacks with that weapon if all enemy units within engagement range of the firing model's unit have been destroyed when you come to resolve those attacks. So we'll pause there. Basically, that means that you can fire in close combat, but you can only target things that you are in close combat with. But because you declare all your shooting at the beginning, you can say, okay, I'm going to have these weapons go into these guys that are tar pitting me, and I'm going to save my big gun to shoot at this other unit across the board. You can declare that, but you're only going to be able to complete that second part if you clear out all the guys around you to begin with. So you have to do some calculation ahead of time. You have to figure out if you're going to actually allocate enough firepower to clear out this tar pit or not. And so I think it really, a lot of times it's going to reward a more conservative strategy of, basically over allocating firepower to that tar pit. But that's the calculation you have to make. If you're able to make that calculation successfully and you win the odds and basically are able to clear the screen and have a bunch of weapons left to fire at other units, that's great. But that's probably not going to be a super common thing. It does clear up some issues where you're not being totally bogged down by a single model, right? You should be able to clear that out. But if it's a unit of 10, 20 dudes, you might have a much harder time doing that. And I think that makes sense. That's fluffy and makes sense mechanistically as well. So I'm fine with that. One of the things I mentioned in the stream is that this really favors loadouts that include some of this anti-personnel defensive weaponry. So it used to be that, why would you ever take a purely defensive weapon when you could just take a more long-range, heavy firepower option, assuming the points work out and everything like that. Why would you do that? Well, now you have a reason to do that, to take those defensive weapons. And I think that's really cool. It makes a lot of sense. And helps you build a little bit more of a sophisticated arsenal than just take the biggest guns you can all the time. This had some nuance and some give and take that I think will enrich the game. It also raises the question of, pistol weapons. So something like the Uvara, right, has its flechette dischargers or whatever that are defensive weapons. And in the rule set, they are categorized as pistols, which means you're basically never going to use them. And I wonder if this type of rule set, the big guns never tire rule, if that will facilitate transitioning some of those would-be pistol weapons into normal weapons that say you have to be within engagement range to use them. So hopefully this facilitates some streamlining, some consolidation of rules of pistol weapons in weird places. The rule also says, in addition, when a vehicle or monster model shoots a heavy weapon, subtract 1 from the hit rolls when resolving that weapon's attack while any enemy units are within engagement range of that model's unit. So again, this only applies when there are models within engagement range. So if you clear out your tar-pitting unit and then fire your big gun, presumably this wouldn't apply then. So you could still have your full ballistic skill when you are firing at the unit across the board. But otherwise, you're firing at -1 to hit. The way that they describe this was basically you have a bunch of dudes crawling all over your tank, so you can't fire effectively. Yeah, that makes sense. It's also notable that because 9th edition limits modifiers, this isn't going to stack with things like stealth fields that would otherwise hinder an ability to fire. So you're capped at the -1. You're taking that when you're doing an engagement range shooting attack. But yeah, I think that's cool. It's an important rule. It makes sense. It kind of offers a nice balance to being able to shoot in combat, but also, add a bit of a penalty. I think it makes sense. Overall, everything we heard today does sound like it's going to help facilitate more monsters, more tanks on the battlefield. Some of the big issues with tanks and monsters right now is that they can be tar-pitted and that they move and shoot at a penalty, and that they're relatively easy to kill in a lot of cases. And so we're solving, or at least addressing, 2 of those 3 issues here. We'll have to wait and see if they do anything about durability with the new rule set. But overall, all else equal, this should help improve the number of tanks or monsters you see on the battlefield. Things like Tau, are not the factions that are most benefited by this, right? Like a Riptide has fly. It can jump out of combat. It's not a big deal. Hammerheads, they're benefited by this, but is a smart missile system and a railgun or an ion cannon, are either those going to clear out a whole unit of attacking models? Probably not. I don't think Tau vehicles have the capacity to really be strong defensive shooters. Plus, we have fly, so the times that this actually comes into play are relatively few. So, really, we're going to rely more on bubble wrap techniques in 9th edition still than other factions might. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. I am excited about the -1 to hit penalty being absent for things that are not infantry, so things like broadsides, that will actually be really useful. So let me know what you think in the comments below, and as always, thanks for watching and happy wargaming. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. This channel is made possible by my supporters over on Patreon. If you enjoyed this video, consider joining our community over there as well. Special thanks to Chris Kessler, Jacob Harkrider, Jake Johnson, Jared Egler, Jim Bob, Mark Sherwing, Michael Byrne, Shifty, Stephen Cohen, Tau Oswell, and Zealous Brimstone. Really, I couldn't do it without you guys. So again, thank you and happy wargaming.